Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another edition of AIW's The Card is Going to Change. Before we get started, we of course want to give the obligatory shout out to our wonderful sponsors who make all of this possible and free to you. Thanks to Smart Mark Video. Make sure you go to Smart Mark Video and download the MP4 and digital downloads of all of our AIW wrestling shows, as well as buying a DVD if you still love that hard copy. Also, thank you to Angelo's Pizza. You can have Angelo's Pizza at any one of our live events, and then also make sure you visit Angelo's Pizza on Madison Avenue in Lakewood, Ohio. It's award-winning, and everything is delicious.
I just ordered the breaded mushrooms in memory of Buddy Landell.
There you go.
No, you didn't, you liar.
I do like those breaded mushrooms.
Since when?
Since Buddy quit giving them to us.
That is a strange development.
And of course, thank you to Jack Prince, who takes care of all of our printing and signage and graphic design needs. You can do the same with Jack Prince and perhaps even get a discount if you follow AI Wrestling on Twitter. We always post the discount codes there. Make sure you check them out at jackprince.com.
JAKPrince.com.
That's right. My name's Steve Guy. I'm the host or mediator, I suppose, of sorts. The guy who tries to keep owner number one and owner number two of AIW in line and on point as much as possible. You've already heard their voices. I'm joined, of course, weekly by John Thorne and Chandler Biggins. We want to say Happy President's Day to all of you out there. And in honor of such a day, we are going to be joined on today's episode by the president of AIW himself, Matt Wadsworth. Welcome to the show, Mr. Wadsworth, or President Wadsworth. I don't know. How should I address you?
He has a lot of names.
He does.
Matt Wadsworth, Rusty Johnson, Mortimer P. Flanagan. He's had quite the list of names in this entertainment industry, so to speak.
And yet none of them are memorable by most people.
Oh, that's too bad. You also recently celebrated a birthday. This is like a momentous occasion for you here with us. Week after your birthday, and it's President's Day. We're honoring you. But before we even get to AIW, your time with like John Thorne predates all of that. I mean, how did you get into wrestling in general?
I actually grew up with John. His grandmother lived right over by my mom. He spent all kinds of time there. We were both wrestling fans as kids. Grew up together watching wrestling. And eventually, John actually got away from wrestling.
I did.
John
really got into the No Limit Soldiers.
And
the Death Row Records.
Charlotte Hornets jerseys.
Is that Master P?
Oh yeah. I was really into like gangster rap music, being a kid, white man in the suburbs.
White suburban kid. But he would make fun of me for still watching wrestling
so
at that
shit
point.
Is stupid. I was out of it for like probably 12 months.
A little bit of time until
so not too long.
Until he discovered ECW.
Yeah.
Along with
then I was like,
my hand. I had been recording it.
I was like, no, this is something. This guy's got a kitchen sink.
So we'd always hit up the ECW shows when they were in town, and started like so many people. We'd screw around in the backyard. We'd wrestle, with our neighbors, and came up with goofy.
Oh, the
gimmicks.
Backyard wrestling.
Oh, backyard wrestling. Yeah, the picnic tables were the top ropes and
the frog splash off the picnic table, and throwing super kicks. I will give us credit. We were smart enough not to do like crazy setting each other on fire, barbed wire. I mean, it was.
Oh, he waited for AIW for that.
He did. Well, no, actually. I did too. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, we talked about the OU episode.
I'm sure we'll get to that one later, but I can't deny it. I have done barbed wire once. So through that, we had met some guys that kind of ran goofy, untrained shows, and I know John's mentioned before that we promoted those. I promoted those with him.
Well, I guess before we even get into that, I think what led us to these people was your life, just like Chandler Biggins, in the public access television industry.
On the same actual show.
It was the same show. It was a few years before Chandler would get involved.
You paved the way for my television career.
It was
SCP was basically Cleveland Wrestling Development.
It was a much more innocent show when I was on it. We were just getting to that point. It actually started out, they did, it was the entertainment for the local rec centers Friday night skating. Was how it started out. So there'd be like open.
It got totally warped from that.
It did. It was while I was on the show that
It was
transitioned.
Just like the WWF, man. It went from being for kids straight into the Attitude Era.
Right.
Went to the Attitude Era.
Right from the smoky rec center of Brooklyn, Ohio.
But
Why did you say it like that?
That's my Vince McMahon.
That's not a good one.
I think I had more gimmicks on that show than most guys have in their wrestling career. I started out as a hillbilly.
Oh, yeah.
And then made the big heel turn when I became aligned with some British aristocrat.
I'm telling you, it was just like wrestling. I wish
Without the wrestling.
this show. I wish this show was available on like YouTube right now for everybody to see.
There's small clips on YouTube, but most of it is lost.
In the basement of Vincent J. Bischoff's house somewhere.
The promoter, Vincent J. Bishop.
What a creative name.
But I was involved in that, and that's how we got in touch with these guys that ran another kind of local untrained, but they weren't backyard wrestling because they had a building and they had a ring and people came out and paid to see them.
I remember you got hired to be the ring announcer in a Just Incredible shirt.
I
once,
did
from the crowd.
And it literally was, we were going to watch the show and they had no ring announcer, so they asked me to get in the ring and ring announce, and didn't have anything for me to wear.
Because they recognized you from your fame on the local public access television show.
They were huge SEP fans.
As seen on TV.
As seen on TV, our ring announcer.
So we used those contacts, John, and I said, well, we can do this.
I said, yeah, these guys are doing it. We could figure it out.
I wish we had a famous ring announcer in AIW. We just got Steve Guy and sometimes Pedro.
Pedro when he feels like coming out of retirement. Yeah. So we had
funny how Gino always available.
That is a valid point. I never really put that together.
Not even an argument. Like every other show, maybe. Gino, I'm available.
Well, that's because we got to keep Steve Guy away from the girls.
Oh, yeah. Restraining over Bud.
Oh, some of us actually are capable of talking to the girls, Chandler Biggins.
Just because you wrote a book called "I'm a Wingman" doesn't mean.
Oh, I was referring more to Chandler Biggins being speechless in front of one female, as we've touched on before.
Oh, more than
Carly
one.
Perez is not booked at G&O, by the way.
So yeah, anyway, we get hooked up with this untrained wrestling company, and then we go, these guys are just doing exactly what we do in our backyard. They just have a ring. So some guy in my math class, he happened to have JT Lightning's phone number, and his name was Fatal Concepts.
Fatal Concepts.
And Fatal Concepts hooked us up with JT, and JT didn't fucking know any better. He just thought we were just regular promoters calling to run his wrestling ring.
He said, "You guys got money? Cool."
Little did he know that I was 15 years old.
And I can't remember if I told this story on the podcast or not. I know I've said it before, but GT actually booked me for a show. Same way Wadsworth. He just goes, "Hey, Biggins, I know you. Come on, ring announce this show."
So was that during your illustrious managerial run in the late 90s?
No, in the late 90s. No, that was around the time I started with AIW.
Yeah, so I mean, we booked this show, and it just so happens that the week of the show, I had made flyers that said, "Come see hardcore teenage violence." Well, that week, the Columbine school tragedy happened, and I was passing out these flyers promoting teenage violence.
With the trench coat on, or?
No trench coat, but I was nearly expelled because they thought that this was a connection to the Trench Coat Mafia, and there was a big investigation launched by the school board at Brecksville Broadview Heights High School, thinking that I was running the Brecksville, Ohio chapter of the Trench Coat Mafia because I was passing out these flyers that said, "Come see hardcore teenage violence and a thumbtack match."
And meanwhile, I'm away at college for all this because I was 18, 19 as we're planning this. So I was away at college while he's doing all this, getting all these guys together from Brecksville. Come back. We run the show.
Well, we almost didn't get to run the show because of the Columbine thing. And there had been, I guess, local wrestlers or something were calling the venue. So, like, keeping this Columbine thing going. So Josh Prohibition, like, he's like 19 years old at the time. He had to put on some shiny shoes, and he had to, I guess, that was probably his first attempt at being an adult. he had to go talk to this venue that had somehow agreed to rent to us and host this wrestling event, which was god awful, by the way.
Oh, it's terrible. And I still have that one. Does exist on video. I have the tape. I found it at home one day.
But from that show, that was a lot of what was featured in the commercials for the best of backyard wrestling, whatever VHS tapes that they were selling on Howard Stern and stuff.
That was the very first one. Josh and Matt's match on the very first one is the match we put them in on that show.
And that was their first time ever being in a wrestling ring. They thought they were just gonna wrestle a couple times in their backyard, and they thought that was it. So I guess.
And there was also where JT first met him.
Yeah,
that was where they were discovered by JT Lightning.
Yeah, and JT was like, "Hey, you guys could probably be pretty good just based on what they were doing," and kind of cut them a hell of a deal on wrestling school, like virtually free, from what I understand.
This all sounds very sweet and nostalgic. But Matt, you've listened to the show. People want to know, and as Biggins sits here, I know he wants to know about the good drama and the wild John Thorne stories that most likely exist from these days.
This was just...
the guy just threw steel chairs now, and he's in his 30s.
This was just before the crazy days. It was a direct result of what we were doing, and the guys that we got in with. That's where John Thorne was born.
we got mixed up in the wrong crowd, and it was just like the old story that you always hear. One goes one direction and one goes the other direction. I went in the real bad direction.
I went away to college, and he went with these guys to Canada.
Yeah.
And it's all downhill from there.
And that's when I got my first rub and tug at the age of 15. And that was it.
I wish I could say that's an exaggeration, but I know the guys, and I'm sure that actually happened.
So, yeah, the guys. The only one that is still left from that crew of people is the Duke.
Well, because he's like a father figure.
Yeah, he's something. I don't know. But, so that resulted in a lot of bad situations for me, I guess.
Now, is this the show, because you guys were EIW?
Yes.
Was this the show that a live chainsaw was running around through the crowd by itself?
Running. We had a guy who, on the show, from that other group that we were talking about, we said, come have a match. So they decide they're going to have a 6-man tag match. And they're going to go nuts. And one guy comes out with a chainsaw. But he isn't smart enough to gimmick the chainsaw and remove the chain.
Oh, no, it's real.
He comes out with a live running chainsaw, swings it around, and then sets it down in the middle of the aisle and walks to the ring.
But there was this is 1999. There's no barricades or anything like that. So there's just a chainsaw, and a chainsaw
vibrating on a gymnasium.
It's just
floor.
Vibrating closer to the people, and it's running.
This sounds like this was an Alex Keller creative idea right here.
They just let this chainsaw go, and finally somebody stood up from the curtain.
Lightning.
Yeah, JT
is sitting there watching it, going, "What the hell are you doing?" Finally runs over and kills this chainsaw.
And he probably said, "What the fuck, dude?"
And I think at that point he realized,
what the hell did I get myself into?
What are the liabilities with like a 15-year-old and a chainsaw?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, what could I have really been charged with?
Well, the problem was my name was on it too, and I was 18.
You were of age. A guy loses a leg.
Just like you, Biggins. I've always had a squeaky clean front guy.
But we actually did run 2 shows.
Oh, yeah, the best.
We did run 2 shows, and this will tell you how far John Thorne's come as a promoter. Because he's told the stories here on the show about how they have to line up their calendar, and they have to check all these other dates and all the other big promotions, what they're running.
You live and you learn, man. And this is the number one prime example of living and learning.
Our first show drew pretty well in Brecksville. Not quite, nothing near what AIW draws today, but for what we were doing, drew decently, friends and family. Our second show, we had to move, I'm sure partially because of a live chainsaw being running around.
That venue, after the combined Columbine allegations and the running chainsaw in the crowd, said, no more.
Yeah, we're done with wrestling.
Never again can wrestling ever come here.
And that stood, because it's been almost 20 years now, and
I actually just had a meeting.
And I'm saying they hit you up like last year.
I just had a meeting,
the first wrestling
and
event.
They were still bringing up that wrestling event.
They were like, we had one here one time.
Man, that sounds very
running chainsaw laying around.
The same old lady that booked that building was still booking it today, and some young guy was in there trying to get events in. And that old lady goes, we had wrestling here one time, and they brought chainsaws in. We can't be having chainsaws. I go, oh man, that sounds really irresponsible.
But we run the second show, and we find an open date for this building that they had, and we line it up, and we promote it, and we get there, and there were maybe 5 people in the building, not including the locker room.
And this is like a gigantic place. Like it was
a massive
huge.
roller rink.
It was called the Roller World Arena.
Like they would do.
Where was this? Do you know?
It's in Parma.
It still exists.
It's under a different name now. It's actually I think it's volleyball courts now.
It hosted many a pro wrestling events.
Tons of shows. This one in particular, 5 people there because the rest of the city of Cleveland was a little preoccupied that day because it was the Browns opening game of 1999. For those of you that don't follow football or are Cleveland Browns fans, that would be the first professional football game played in Cleveland, regular season game, since 1995.
Yeah, the new expansion team had come, and they had ruined our pro wrestling dreams.
Yeah, they had Drew Carey at that too. I don't think you booked anybody with that high profile.
All we had was me almost killing John Thorne with a vertical suplex.
Well, you were also on television. So.
I think our biggest star was KJ Fury.
And he was years away from his appearance in American Wedding.
Yeah, which was barely anything.
We spent entirely too much time in the theater trying to figure out where he was in that
Yeah, he fucking lied.
But yeah, we drew maybe 5 people. I was pissed off because a whole lot of money came out of my bank account that day.
I was 15. I didn't really have any money.
Yeah, he didn't have a bank account. I had some money at least. I proceeded to try to hit a vertical suplex on John Thorne, lose control of him, but still attempt to finish it and almost break his neck.
So you're wrestling at this point.
I
No
was
longer
wrestling.
just
No, I
promoting.
was wrestling on those shows.
Oh,
if you can call it that.
He had a hot little indie run as the franchise, Pat Flanagan.
The franchise.
Where'd you come up with that name?
We were entirely too large of Triple Threat fans when we did the backyard stuff, and I was the only one that stuck with it. But we all ran with the Triple Threat names.
Who was the Bam Bam of the team?
Bam Bam was our next door neighbor.
Joe Zabala.
Joe Zabala was who became the Beast Nick Bass when we transitioned.
You have a Francine?
Not then, but years later, I would have a Francine.
The actual Francine.
Before we jump ahead, though, Roller World, I saw one of my favorite matches there of all time. This is totally off topic, but I saw Newjack in a hardcore match against a guy who was a Nazi.
Yeah, Newjack the Basket Nazi.
He wasn't a Nazi. His name was the Basket Nazi.
The Basket Nazi. We were on that show.
And what had happened is, so we had booked Newjack against this one guy, and he didn't want to wrestle that guy. And then Chris Hamrick just randomly showed up. He wasn't even booked. And Newjack was out in the line, and this guy named the Basket Nazi walks up to Newjack, and he says, "Hey, Newjack, I'm the Basket Nazi. I'm the hardcore guy in Cleveland."
Which is awesome to tell Newjack.
So Newjack begged all of us who were running the show, "I want to wrestle that fucking Nazi guy." And we had to make him promise, because this is like, mass transit era kind of Newjack. Like this
just at the tail end of ECW, just before ECW showed up as part of the invasion.
Oh, great.
And this is
the era Newjack you're talking about.
But this is like right after Beyond the Mat is out, so you hear about these justifiable homicides and stuff. And Newjack wrestled the Basket Nazi that night.
Well,
him and Chris Hamrick both beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, because they went out there at the beginning of the show, and the promoter, despite the fact that Hamrick and Newjack are supposed to be opponents at one point, he has Hamrick go to the ring with Newjack as he goes out there to interrupt the Basket Nazis promo and tells Hamrick, "Listen, if he gets out of control, you need to take care of it." And Chris Hamrick looks at him and goes, "What in the hell am I gonna do if Newjack wants to kill this guy?"
And let me paint the scene for you real quick, okay? Pretty decently large crowd. We have multiple ECW people on the show.
Chetty was on the show.
Oh, my favorite of all time, Chris Chetty. I booked him from my parents' household landline. Chris Chetty's there, Dawn Marie's there, Francine's there, Newjack's there, Chris Hamrick's there. Decent crowd. Let me paint the scene to you. This Basket Nazi who's in the line comes from out of the line into the locker room, puts on a pair of red leather pants, gets out a Nazi flag, and ties it around his neck like a cape, and puts on some fucking snowboard goggles, Grandmaster Sexay style.
Now, this is also, it's not bad enough the guy has told Newjack that he's the hardcore guy in Cleveland. He is now dressed like a Nazi on top of
This
it.
is the kind of heat that Tracy Smothers would get.
Oh,
Well, the funny thing is, I was there. I'm 99% sure that Hamrick was all Confederate flagged out.
Oh,
he-
yeah.
oh,
that
absolutely.
was 100% his gear.
but Newjack and Chris Hamrick, they were like best friends that day.
They were buddies from ECW.
So that fucking Nazi went out to some music that was similar to like Daniel Bryan's WWE music. That guy was not the hardcore guy in Cleveland that night. That was definitely Newjack.
Well, there was a whole lot of hardcore going on, but he wasn't on any of the offense.
And I think if you go to YouTube, you can see Abdullah the Butcher kick his ass. And the poor guy, the Baskin Nazi, has ended up with hepatitis in the last few years. So I wonder why.
Well, I was just saying, not surprised considering some of the stuff he did. Also, that same night, Chris Chetty, we said they booked Chris Chetty. I wasn't booking at this point. John was helping them.
I fucking was really like 16 years old, and I would call these people to book them in like different states with a calling card, and then they would call back, and like my mom would answer and be like, "No, I'm on the other line. You got to call back later."
Chris Chetty's calling, and
She'd be like, somebody named Chris Chetty called. Some guy named Newjack called.
Yeah, because I remember you were corresponding with Christopher Daniels was when you said Ken Kennedy.
Low Key, Reckless Youth, all kinds of people. But yeah, like I would just book these people fucking on a landline. They didn't know that they were talking to a fucking teenager.
yeah, they had Chetty versus M-Dog 20 versus Matt Cross. And I remember specifically, I'm standing just in front of the draping that made up the locker room, and Newjack's standing right next to me. And all I'm listening to is Newjack continuing yelling, "Fuck him up, Chris! Fucking kill him! Fuck him up!" And I'm going, holy shit, what is about to happen right now?
And that's the night that Chris Chetty contributed to my delinquency when he said, "Hey, I got some words for you to live by." And I said, "What's that, Mr. Chris Chetty, my favorite wrestler of all time?" He said, "If you walk up to every girl in the bar and say, 'Hey, I want to fuck you,' one of them will say yes." And I said, "That is great advice."
Guy couldn't have said, like, stay in school, get good grades.
Chris Chetty could have led you to Harvard, but instead he led you.
Hey, man, Chris Chetty got me laid a couple times, probably.
But
The Harvard of its own right.
But so we had all those guys on there. That was the first time we had Francine. We would bring her back another time.
Also, the first time I ever saw cocaine in my life, allegedly.
A lot of growing up for young John Thorne at this show.
Grew up fast, man. These fucking kids today don't know what it's like to grow up in the 90s. Really fucking molded me for success.
But we bring Francine back, and we decided to bring her in. We were booked as part of a charity show, a 9/11 tribute show that all the
This
local
already
indies,
sounds terrible.
all the local indies were going to be part of
It was like
And one of the last times wrestling was allowed in Mount Carmel, by the way.
prior to AIW.
it was at Mount Carmel. It was like what it was like the Ohio version of what the original National Pro Wrestling Day was. It was like every company was going to come together. It was called United We Stand, and we were going to donate. It was probably some scam that this.
Well, the
Whoever put it together.
The scam was that it was supposed to donate money, but then it only drew about 50 people.
Yeah, I was going to say there were more people in the locker room than there were in the crowd that night. But for whatever reason, because we had connected with Lou Marconi, who would later become the trainer at the school we established,
Beef Stew Lou.
and he had pulled strings to get us a tag match because we were still untrained goofballs. I was doing the authority figure thing then, so I was more of a manager.
Yeah, you've really had this authority figure thing going for about 20 years.
You're like the Stephen McMahon of AIW.
Seriously, I've been around for years
That's-
doing it, but I was doing the authority figure thing, so I was a manager. So they decided they're going to have this tag match, and we're going to bring Francine with us as a special guest referee.
Were you guys running like the same weekend or something? Or
I think so, maybe.
I don't even know.
We had to- we had-
it was just us being dicks and bringing Francine just because
No.
we knew it would piss everybody off.
No,
I think this was like Friday and you guys were Sunday or something.
maybe
That makes sense.
I know that one time we did book Francine to just go sit in the crowd with us at a local indie, just
Because
to
they
piss-
tried to book her, and you
just-
guys told them no.
just to piss everybody off for like a publicity stunt. Like we used to go and cause like a lot of trouble. But like, yeah, we just booked her to come sit in the crowd to just take attention away from every single person in
She
the
was
ring.
a bigger name than anyone on that show.
Man, I cheaped out. I just brought a newspaper that one time.
Yeah, we brought Francine like fresh off a like ECW run.
And so she was doing the Bronco Buster all over the place. So they're laying out the match and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And they're like, listen, someone's got to take the Bronco Buster. At some point, one of us has to take it. So it's the big debate, who's going to take it?
Twist my arm.
Who's going to take it? Well, she goes, listen, you've got this heel manager. Use him. She goes, why don't, at the end of the match, he'll jump in. He'll give some weak chair shot to somebody, jump around and celebrate. You lay him out, knock him down in the corner, boom, he gets the Bronco Buster. So sure enough, get in there, give this weak chair shot, start jumping around, celebrating like I just won Game 7 of the World Series. Turn around, the face is waiting for me because it didn't affect him at all. Gives me a right hand, sets me up in the corner. Here comes Francine, Bronco Buster in the corner.
How was it for you?
It knocked the wind out of me.
I bet it did.
Everybody's like, it had to be awesome. I'm like, it sucked.
Yeah,
it
that like
was
a took your breath away kind of thing? Is that what you're saying?
Literally knocked the wind out of me. It literally, there's no work about it. She is just bouncing on your chest.
So, that sounds terrible. Tell the truth. Is that the closest a vagina was to your face at that point in time in your life?
Oh, at that point in my life, it actually might have been.
Poor Flanagan.
She was just happy to be back with the franchise.
That's a good one. Okay, well, one thing I remember from this 9/11 show, what was the T-shirt that almost got the show shut down?
Lou Marconi lost his mind when one of the guys in our match showed up. And he thought, 9/11 tribute, this will be awesome.
A Catholic church, by the way.
Walks into Our Lady of Mount Carmel, walks down the locker room, gets his gear on, and is wearing a shirt that says, "Fuck terrorism."
Damn right he was.
Couldn't even put like 2 stars. It was just the word.
It was plain as day. They looked at him and they went, "What are you doing?" Made him take it off, gave him some generic shirt to wear.
They should see the shit we do in Mount Carmel now.
Well, speaking of T-shirts, that's a good one, Wadsworth. But let's talk about one of our new sponsors, Thrift Store Jobber. He's an AIW fan that is after my heart with his merchandise. I'm going to blow the entire gate next week on these shirts. Let's talk about it's thriftstoreJobber.BigCartel.
You better not blow the entire gate on some fucking T-shirts.
ThriftstoreJobber.BigCartel.com. He's also on Instagram and eBay as ThriftStoreJobber. And I'll tell you the first shirt I'm going to buy. It's a size XL, so I'm just going to hang it on the wall.
Oh, yeah? You going to squeeze into that one?
No, I'm going to hang it on the wall. It's a styling and profiling Ric Flair shirt, and it says "Woo" on it. Only $30. That's wheeling and dealing, as he says.
Wheeling and dealing. Well, I would pay an additional $30 to watch you put that XL on.
Not happening. It's going to be hanging. I'm going to put it in a shadow box, hang it on the wall.
Also, shout out to Thrift Store Jobber for giving me that original recipe for Loco one time at the AIW show. It's still in my fridge. I'm saving it for a real dark day.
That's going to be that'd be a dark week after that.
Yeah, I'm saving it.
All right. Well, thank you, Thrift Store Jobber. And we're back here with Matt Wadsworth, the president of AIW. You've been around for a long time with AIW and everybody, the early incarnations, everything beforehand. We've discussed that. What about different legends that you've come across and during this time? Do you have any memorable moments with any of those guys?
I think my favorite one is we talked about the OU show, or you guys talked about the OU show.
Yes.
A little while ago, and obviously Honky Tonk Man being part of that. We see a McDonald's in the middle of nowhere. Swing in there with the Honky Tonk Man. We order our food, and Honky Tonk Man is spending this entire time trying to get them to recognize him. So he's giving hints, but won't say who. He goes, do I seem familiar to you at all? And these kids.
Did he sing for them?
He'd been off television for 25 years at this point.
I mean, this is what, 2000 something or other. 2007. So half these guys probably weren't even born when he was on TV. And they're humoring him. Yeah, you seem familiar. He's like, well, you ever watch wrestling? You watch it back in the 80s. And he's like, and they're like, Hulk Hogan? And he's like, yeah, now do I look familiar? They're like, Randy Savage? He's like, yeah, they're naming everyone else except the Honky Tonk Man.
Greg the Hammer Valentine?
Yeah. And it's literally people like that are directly associated with him. And so we're sitting there and we're waiting for the food. He cannot get them. And finally he says something about how yeah. So we're waiting and he notices them taking the fries that have been sitting around and going to throw. He goes, what are you guys going to do with those? I go, well, they can only sit for like 7 minutes or something, and then we have to throw them out and put a fresh batch in. So he goes, well, if you're just going to throw them out anyways, why don't you just toss some in our bag? So like 2 medium fries he gets out of the deal, thrown into the bag.
See that, man? You work for Vince. You don't need a retirement plan or anything like that.
No,
it's a gift that keeps on giving.
The Honky Tonk Man.
Well, they take that sushi tray at WrestleMania weekend right out of your fucking check.
I think it's amazing that the guy's been off television for 25 years, and he is just working hard to get those free French fries.
He was like, no, there's no, just throw. And they're like, yeah, okay.
Let's get those shoot interviews on YouTube,
So we're leaving. We leave. We get in my car. We're getting ready to pull out. And there was a girl that had been on break that had walked in right as we were leaving. And she comes running out of McDonald's, running out of the doors, flagging the car down, waving frantically. So we stop, and Honky Tonk rolls down the passenger window, and she goes, are you really the Honky Tonk Man? The one person in the entire building that would have recognized him is on break the whole time. Comes sprinting after him, gets him to sign a flyer that was some makeshift flyer that we happen to have.
He would have gotten the nuggets for free, too.
And she's, my brother's going to go crazy when he finds out that I met you.
The Honky Tonk Man came to this very McDonald's.
And we pull out, and he's like, see?
Still got it, kid.
See what happens? Man, you go tell your friends I got you those fries.
So this is a perfect segue because, as you alluded to, we have talked about the OU show previously on this show. And if I remember correctly, a certain Matt Wadsworth disappeared with some ladies during that OU show.
About 10.
10 ladies.
Some of the accounts may have been a little exaggerated.
Well, let's talk about why the ladies liked you. You were the only one to take thumbtacks and barbed wire.
Well, and that's the funny. You guys talked about me being in that match. We got down at the time we were doing commentary live over the house mic, and we got down there, and we're in this backyard with this crappy little sound system to play entrance music. We're like, I'm not
fucking goof sound system, I imagine.
We're like, I'm not doing commentary the whole time. None of these guys are gonna care. So we're like, well, what are we gonna do? Screw it. I brought some shorts and a t-shirt. We'll wrestle. I'll get in there with John, and we're coming up with this whole thing, and Thorne goes, all right, here's gonna be the finish. We're gonna throw thumbtacks down. I'll bump you in the thumbtacks, wrap barbed wire around your head, and I'll double stomp you. And I was like, all right, cool.
Took one look at those college girls. You were game.
Well, that's the gimpy girl sitting by the entranceway with Biggins. And she tells Biggins, is this guy cool? And he's like, yeah, this guy's awesome.
How many drugs and alcohol were involved in your decision to think all of this was a good idea?
I was actually sober at the time I made the decision. Later in the night may not have been the case. At that point, I was still very sober.
Now, see, you didn't even have to read Steve Guy's book. I was your wingman in Athens.
Referee Drew Taylor, I'm talking to him afterwards. He's talking to these two girls, and he says, we're going to go out. They're taking me to some party that's going on. You want to go? I said, well, let me get a shower real quick because I just wrestled and I smell. So,
No, wait, cool. Girls love that scent, man. Giving off those pheromones.
Masculine.
Those pheromones.
So I go shower, get dressed. And they take us to some apartment, for a party, and we're drinking at the apartment. And eventually we get bored there, start going to some bars. They buy me like this chalice, like medieval chalice filled with beer.
College life, man. I should have went to college instead of going. I should have went to college instead of going to that Canadian rub and tug.
And I still remember you guys said the biggest star that whole weekend, that night, was Tarver.
Oh yeah,
Michael Tarver was a giant star in Athens, Ohio.
If you had 10, he probably had 20.
Oh my God, he was insane. So he shows up at this bar that we're at, and the girls we were with instantly are like, oh, hey, who at the party are telling everyone, yeah, he got slammed in thumbtacks and he had barbed wire. And of course, the barbed wire didn't do a damn thing to my head, but I'm pointing to the tiny red mark on my head going, yeah, I had barbed wire on my head. So we're at this party. We go over to the bar. Tarver shows up at the bar.
The lengths the wrestlers will go to fucking pick up a chick, though, right?
Tarver shows up. He sits down, starts BSing with us. The girls instantly turn their attention to him. So,
and like you were saying, they bought you beer. He wasn't drinking at the time, so anytime somebody would offer him a free drink, he would take an energy drink.
Yeah.
So then by the end of the night, he had like a seizure.
And this was towards the end of the night. This was almost closing time at the bar.
He did have a seizure in the Honky Tonk Man's hotel room because he drank like something like 27 Red Bulls.
So the girls go off to the bar for something, and I made a comment to him. I was like, "Hey, man, these girls totally shifted their attention." And he was like, "Say no more." Fucking girls are at the bar. He just disappears. Like
Get out of here!
ninja.
Get out of here, you fucking in shape guy!
Jacked black dude.
No
one's looking at me.
I took barbed wire tonight, bro.
As far as they knew, you were the king of the death match. And then Tarver ended up having a seizure in Honky Tonk Man's room. Honky Tonk Man stayed up all night telling us stories about how the airline industry imports all the drugs into America. And then a real bad story about how he had an infection in his junk. And then the best is he would eat we ordered pizza.
Allegedly, he said all these things.
Allegedly. He would eat the pizza and then throw the crust out the door, and he was perfect every time. Said he should have been a ball player. Tarver also did a demonstration on how to wrestle with the college girls, and there's a couple nip slips.
Yeah, he would get them in the ring and like scoop slam them.
Biggins, paying attention to those nip slips always.
Yeah. What's that?
Matt Riot runs off into the woods with a girl.
Were you posting those on Mr. Skin, Biggins?
Yeah, I had time codes about when it was on the DVD. But I like how you said about Ref Drew Taylor. That was actually the night that we looked around and we go, oh, shit, we don't have any refs. We don't have a ring announcer. And that's how Drew Taylor and Pedro got cast into their roles because we go, we got like four guys.
They were ring crew at the time.
Yeah, they were just ring crew.
They were our ring
and
crew.
Security. And that's how they ended up with jobs in professional wrestling is going to this college thing.
Let's try to wrap this bad boy up on a positive note. It's been a pleasure. This President's Day, president-size edition of The Card is going to change with the president of AIW, Matt Wadsworth. You've become the commentator for all the shows of the guys, that maybe have gone on the main roster because so many wrestlers have sat there with you. Any stories of working with any of those guys early on that you enjoyed, or maybe they sat in on commentary with you?
Saturday Night Commentary is a more recent one. But some of the guys, obviously Seth Rollins was a guy, and he was one that it was, as they've talked about, kind of a dark era for AIW.
Right.
There was not a lot of quality coming out of those shows. So he stood out then. And even then I was like, man, this guy is the MVP. Like, he doesn't have a bad match for us.
What about the time the Sandman caned you, man? That was fucking sweet.
That goes back again to the earlier days. Before we booked Francine, the great idea was we were going to bring in Tommy Dreamer to be a special guest ref. So we're watching Raw together one night, and who jumps the rail out of the crowd as part of the invasion but Tommy Dreamer? And none of us had any idea this was coming. He was supposed to be on the show 3 weeks later. So they call him up, and he's like, yeah, sorry, it was a last-minute thing. I couldn't tell anybody.
We had a sweet commercial on our website to a Linkin Park song. We were really promoting this fucking... We were really promoting this.
So he says, I'll tell you what, I'll get the Sandman for you.
And you're paying the bandwidth for the commercial because there was no such thing as YouTube.
Yeah, it was like...
Yeah, it was on the website.
It was on whatever the website was, like EFW.
It was embedded on the website.
EFW.TV.
So he gets the Sandman for us. So again, I was doing the authority figure thing, and I had to come out at the beginning of the show, and I was the bad guy authority figure who was working with the top bad guy. So we come out at the beginning of the show, and I announced that Tommy Dreamer's not going to be there.
And I believe you were in a group named The Faction.
The Faction, indeed, with Brian Backstreet and the Pretty Boy.
The Faction.
It was well thought out.
Mortimer P. Flanagan and his evil The Faction.
So I proceed to run down ECW and talk about how we don't need Dreamer there. Here comes the Sandman. Sandman comes out. I start running my mouth to him thinking I've got backup. Turn around, they disappear. Turn back around, wham, cane shot to the head. The only problem was, if you've seen the kendo sticks that the Sandman normally carries, they have a little bit of give to them. They bend when he swings.
He didn't bring this one. We bought it from the Eastern Arts store at the Parmesan Mall.
He had been in Canada.
And we've already detailed. You guys didn't know very much of what you were doing at this point.
He had been in Canada.
Speak for yourself, pal.
like the night before or the week before or something. Apparently his kendo sticks were a separate piece of luggage from all of his other luggage.
Can't carry that on, man.
And he said, they lost the bag with my kendo sticks. Well, what the hell are you going to do when you book the Sandman and he doesn't have kendo sticks?
Something tells me he didn't have kendo sticks. Like, can we talk about that, though? There was a store in a mall where you could just buy
kendo sticks.
Viking swords and kendo
All kinds of
sticks.
stuff they had.
And
What store was this?
Chinese
What mall?
throwing
It
stars.
was literally like Eastern Arts was the name of it.
Chinese throwing stars and fucking all kinds of you could just walk in there and buy
And
it.
I know from going in there, they never checked IDs. Once I had a dragon knife or something. I remember people from my high school would go there and buy all these weapons. They're brass knucks with a knife.
Is that the knife that you still sleep with next to your bed because the werewolf broke into your house?
No, that's another knife. I don't talk about that knife. Cut this out.
Let's
So
let's hear. I think the world needs to hear your werewolf story.
That's a story. That's a story for another show.
Cut this out.
So he hits me with this cane shot instantly, and I'm laying on the mat checking my head because it hurt so bad and it was so warm. I was convinced he had found a way to split me open with a kendo stick. And I check it. So I roll out and I get help backstage, and one of the guys had something wrapped with an ace bandage. After the match, they're like, I got an idea. They proceed to take the ace bandage off a leg, sweaty as hell, and wrap it around my forehead. Sandman takes one look and cracks up. It's the best thing he's ever seen in his life, apparently. And I have a still frame because it was on VHS. Somebody got me a VHS at one point, and I captured it on a computer. And this stick is completely wrapped around my skull.
Sandman, by the way, rocking a FUBU baseball jersey all day and just doing so much cocaine.
Allegedly.
Allegedly doing so much cocaine in front of a bunch of teenagers.
Allegedly, the first words he said off the plane to a teenage John Thorne were, "Hey man, know where I can get some coke?"
Yep, that's exactly what he said.
Such great role models.
It was me, him, and Francine in a car. And I mean, this is why I turned out the way I did, man. You're really learning.
Oh, so much.
Wait till we get into my origin story. It's gonna get dark.
So many questions I never knew. Questions I never knew I had being answered right all day today. This is great. Matt Wadsworth, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Once again, thanks to all of our sponsors: Smart Mark Video, Angelo's Pizza, Jack Prince, and of course the new sponsor, Thrift Store Jobber, Chandler Biggins' favorite.
He loves doing those table reads.
And we want to thank everybody for joining us this past weekend at AIW show, the Walk the Plank show that we had. So thanks for coming out to that. And we'll talk to you guys next week. For John Thorne and Chandler Biggins, I'm Steve Guy. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks.
At least it was just a thanks this time.
You know.